Thank you very much, Concordia. I suppose, first of all, it's back in 2011, I think, when we all first got to know about this, when in the day and days of the last government there was these options for licences granted to two companies. I think one of them was Lochalan Gas and the other one was Tamboran. And those of us in Leitrim County Council at the time became very aware of the whole issue of hydraulic fracturing and what was going on. And mainly, I suppose, a film went around at that time. I think it was Gaslands was the name of it. And a lot of us, certainly public representatives, were invited to view that and to see what was going on in many other parts of the world where this particular practice was taking place. And it was horrifying, because where we seen it happening was in vast desert areas, many places in central America, the United States and other places. And to compare that to where we lived, you know, I suppose, the drumlins of rural County Leitrim and Sligo and the mountainous areas of Fermanagh and different places, it was a total sea change of a difference, and to imagine that this kind of a process could be used in our communities was absolutely frightening. And I want to commend particularly all the people in the communities who stood up and who fought for this. And I know in Leitrim County Council we had motions for to ban hydraulic fracturing, and while we got them passed, it wasn't unanimous. And there were people who were convinced by those who came from these lobbies that it was about progress and it was about jobs and all of that. And it's absolutely tremendous that today we're here in the National Parliament going to have, I think, unanimous support for a ban on hydraulic fracturing. And credit for that belongs to the ordinary people on the ground who have done so much work, so much Trojan work, and some of them are in the gallery here this evening, to make this happen, to bring this day about. And I want to congratulate Tony McLaughlin on the bill that he's brought forward. As my colleague has said earlier on, we introduced similar legislation earlier in the year. Whichever of them came up first was going to be supported, I think, by everyone in the House. That's the way we need to move forward on this particular issue, because it is an issue which is about the ordinary people of the country, and it's about the ordinary people of the country standing up to the corporations, standing up to big business and saying that people's lives matter, that the environment matters, that ordinary people deserve a future, and that future can't be bought in pounds, pence or euros or billions or promises of some big future that nobody is ever going to see. Because we all have seen that the hydraulic fracturing business and that these big corporations around the world, they don't employ ordinary people from the local community. What they do is they bring in teams of experts from abroad, many of them, I suppose, moving around the world as cheap labour to be employed on the fracturing pads, and then when they dry out a place they move off to somewhere else and they leave an economic and environmental mess behind them. We don't want that. We want to ensure that that doesn't happen. And I'm glad that the government has withdrawn their amendment. But there are many aspects of that amendment which was, I think, very dangerous, and which were pointing us in a direction where they were talking about, this report, and people have versed it well here, the report coming for the EPA carried out by CDM Smith. CDM Smith is a company that is back in the gas industry. The two other parts of that report, the cross-border element coming from Queen's University and UCD, have both withdrawn from it because they recognised that it was going nowhere and that it was totally inappropriate. And I think, what we need to be doing here is saying very clearly that when this gets to committee stage, that it's going to go through and that it's going to be developed and grown and expanded, and ensure that we can make it as strong as possible to guarantee that the future of all of our people is guaranteed. That we're not going to leave it open, that in some time with some other government or some other situation come in place where a similar type of exploration or other types of exploration can come forward that will try to take this gas out of the ground. Because regardless of whether it's there or not, of whether it's accessible, it's safe or not, if we are about our future, if we are about building the world which is about ending climate change and taking us in a different direction, we have to be looking at a new way of doing things. We have to be putting all our energies and all our efforts into renewable energy and into renewable sources of developing a future economies. And that's not going to happen if we continuously depend on fossil fuels. And that's not just onshore, but it's also offshore, as I said earlier on. And I think, it's great credit to Tony McLaughlin and to all of the people who have brought this bill forward. And as I say, I'm a little bit worried about some of the government's stuff that they have in the amendment, particularly the line that was in it about adverse effects on the utilisation of states' natural resources and of the state's energy policy.
Right,
the state's energy policy should not be about fossil fuels. And that's what we need to set that marker. And I think the beginning of setting that marker is here tonight. And again, I want to commend the many, many people who have done so much Trojan work over the past number of years since we first seen Gaslands, who have made this day happen. And I commend them particularly for it. And I also give due credit to Tony McLaughlin.
Thank you very much, Deputy Michael Fitzmaurice.